Good morning, friends. My name is host Eric. I'm the host of Talking with Fantasy People, and this video is about knowing the future. We can all agree that people can know the past because it's already happened. So, there's reason to say that you know it rather than, say, predict it. But we all act as though we know the future, at least to some extent, as well, because we all act as though the world is subject to a basic inertia. If I put my keys on that shelf, then when I return later to that shelf, they'll still be there. Is behaving as though I know the future. When I go to retrieve them, I'm behaving as though I knew the future before I started to go to retrieve them, and that the future would include them being there. In the football analogy video that I made yesterday, I talked about the quarterback knowing with his SI, and I talked about it in a way that suggested he was predicting the future with his SI. I said, the linebacker lined up over there last time, and that last time he got around my lineman by juking around him, and he came around this way and sacked me. And since he's lined up in the same spot this time, I'm going to act as though I know the future, which is that he's going to do what he did last time. This would be a very weak form of knowing the future, because, of course, the linebacker is also aware that he lined up there last time, and this time he may be purposefully lined up there to try to get you to know wrong. In other words, to get you to predict that he's going to do this again, but instead, he actually drops back into coverage. And now you've stepped up into the pocket, even though there's no pressure, and the guy you were going to throw it to after stepping up into the pocket is now covered by the linebacker you expected to sack you. So, inertia kind of knowing the future that links to SI is more or less effective depending on the context and the kind of engaged interface that's going on. With objects, it's at its most effective. In general, object permanence is a good way to know the future, because in general, if you're especially in general, people keep their own objects in their own space, and by and large, other people don't mess with them that much. So, because of this, object permanence works well for us. We have enough control over the spaces we typically inhabit that we can assume that where we put something is where it is still. It works at least well, SI is kind of predicting the future, when it simply extrapolates from past performance and assumes future results. So, if I were to tell you, well, last time I bet on horse number 4, I won. So I'm going to bet on horse number 4 this time, on this race as well. Then I would be demonstrating an extremely caricaturish version of an SI person using SI too much to know. A good example of this is the gentleman Sam, who was on the show alone, and he got to be on the show twice. And the first time on the show, he didn't do well fishing. He didn't catch any fish. When he went back to go on the show a second time, he didn't bring any fishing line or fishing tackle as one of his items, or hooks, because he had misgeneralized from his previous experience. It's true that he didn't catch very many fish, or maybe even any fish, in his first foray into this show, but in the second foray, he was in a different location, and it turned out that fish were, he definitely should have brought fishing stuff. He knew he was going to be by the water, but he was by the water last time. It didn't work last time, but he was the only person who didn't bring fishing stuff. He still won, actually. But it was not because he knew the future well about whether or not fishing stuff would pay off if he brought it. Okay, now let's look at this other thing, NI and peeling eyes. So, when you may have heard the expression, keep your eyes peeled for something. You know, keeping your eyes peeled is a way of telling somebody, be in a state of NI, observational readiness. Note something actual happening now in the world and recognize what it means. So I might tell you, okay, we're going to turn off here pretty soon, but it's not a marked road. It's just a little dirt road. And the way we have to keep our eyes out for two trees that are next to each other. One is twice the size of the other one, and the smaller one is leaning in towards the road a little bit. All right, that's the landmark I remember. Now, the passenger has been instructed, keep your eyes peeled for this. Presumably the driver is also keeping his eyes peeled for this, but the driver is saying, I might not observe the signal that tells me where to turn. So that's what we need to do, though, is look for that signal, and then we'll know the future, which is I turn here and we go there. Okay, so let's talk about prescience, precreation, and prediction. Prescience, which is spelled pre-science, which is kind of interesting. I didn't even ever think about that until I wrote it down, and I was like, is that how you spell prescience? It's just pre-science? And I Googled it, and yeah, that's how you spell it. Pre-science is knowing the future. That's the definition of it. So, it says here, the fact of knowing something before it takes place, knowledge. With extraordinary prescience, Jung actually predicted the Nazi eruption. Well, okay, I mean, what a ridiculous sentence that is as an example. That's what it says here when you Google prescience. Okay, this is I didn't even look at what it said there, but ironically, it mentions Jung in this example sentence. Of course, that's a stupid example sentence. Was it prescience or was it prediction? Those are different things. Knowers have prescience when they're knowing the future, if they're knowing it with NI. But deliberators predict. They don't know the future. So what this is saying is, well, it's because prediction is used. Prediction is almost a contronym. We mean it in the sense when before something's happened. We mean it to say to decide on the most probable outcome, which is acknowledging that you don't know. Whereas when we use it after something's happened, we say he was correct in his prediction. What we're really doing is saying people can't know the future. They have to predict it by deciding what the most probable outcome is. And so he did a good job of that. Except whoever knew the future probably didn't know it by deciding it via a probability calculus. So we're just imposing this general accepted belief that you can only predict the future because it hasn't happened yet. You can't know it. Onto people who successfully knew the future retroactively. Okay? Which is kind of funny, right? But now let's talk about short-term prescience versus long-term prescience. I've told this story before, but it's the example I have. So it's the only example I have really that I can think of, that I can come up with. But I was driving. Well, this sort of thing's happened a couple times while I was driving. But this particular instance, I recall it well because at the time I was thinking about cognitive functions, and so it was like, oh, that's that. What just happened there is yeah. What just happened there was short-term impressions. I was driving, and without really being able to explain any reason why, I just knew that this guy is going to suddenly come over here, and this guy here is making it so I can't go that way, and this guy behind me is on my ass, and so I need to prevent his stupidly coming over into me right now for no reason. And I did. I stopped, pushed the brake a little bit, and slowed down the guy. So then I got over, and then he, it was like where I started. I started my go away, and then he came, and I was right, So, and then I go, Jesus, how did I know that was going to happen? That was short frame prescience. That was my NI, my SE NI. Even though it's unconscious. It's not broken, and so I have no idea. After it happened, then I started doing my normal deliberation ways. Well, what the fuck was that? And the only explanation is it's an NI kind of knowing that's the kind of NI that happens in conjunction with SE in real time. Long frame prescience is something that I don't have any examples of for myself because I always only predict long frame stuff. I'm ignoring NI, so I never feel like I know what's going to happen. I just feel like I'm predicting what's going to happen. Even if I'm using my intuition, I don't behave as though I know what's going to happen, and I'm ignoring NI in the sense that even if it's intuiting what's going to happen, I don't trust it and think that I do know what's going to happen. I use extroverted intuition to come up with other possible things that might happen, and then I'm back to my normal state of being, which is, well, I don't know what's going to happen. So, but for NI DOMs, they definitely do know what's going to happen about things within this long frame prescience understanding. However, the fact that they know it doesn't necessarily mean they're right. The more long frame and the more dynamic the system, the more chaotic, the more variables there are, the less possible it is for an individual's intuition to know what's going to happen long term. But the thing is, that's one of those issues where an individual person experiences it differently than the other parties. So we have to look at it from a subject-object-observer perspective. As the subject, my friend Corey knew before anybody else was even talking about it that Bitcoin was going to make him rich, and bought a bunch of it early on and was right. Very early. From an observer's perspective, I go, wow, he was right. He successfully predicted the future. No, he didn't. He knew what was going to happen. As the object here is a little bit more challenging to talk about because the object is going to be an object of analysis. It's either, well, I guess it's, you can say it's the thing that you know, or it's the knowing that you're observing somebody else performing. Like, I'm the observer of Corey having known that, but I don't get to actually observe the knowing process, right? I just get to hear him tell me at the time this was going to happen and that I should buy it. and that he knew it was going to happen. And I get to realize later on, and I agreed with him at the time, yeah, you're probably right. But for me, it's you're probably right. And I get to know later on with my SI that he was right. But for some reason, none of us are going to say he did know the future. We're going to say he predicted it. Now, let's talk about pre-creation. So, the short frame prescience also needs a subject object observer thing, but that one's a lot easier, right? It's like the observer in this situation is myself. I am observing that reality. Or you could say you're the observer of my anecdote, right? The subject in that story about the car was me. I was doing the action. And the object of my observation and knowledge were the other cars. So it's like sometimes that subject-object-observer distinction isn't very informative, and sometimes it is, but it can always apply. Anyway, pre-creation. This is a term my friend Corey made up, and he didn't make it up in this context at all, but I saw today, as I realized this was pre-science, that these words, the pre-creation belongs in here as well. It was a necessary term that doesn't exist. Pre-creation is prescience about aesthetics. So, how did Eric make that whole thing up right there, right then? That was obviously a song that already existed because it was so cleanly put together with all these various rhymes or whatever. Occasionally, I'll nail a freestyle like that, so that it'll be like, well, you couldn't have just made all that up right there on the fly out of nothing. But I did, because when I'm in extroverted intuition mode in that capacity, I can't ignore NI. My NI and NE are thread together like this at that point, because I've removed any capacity, any extra attentional space. Like, because my extroverted intuition is fully engaged in a generative sense, and I'm not really sure how that happens. That's what it is, pre-creation. Like, another way to understand pre-creation is when we, okay, I'm doing a terrible job right this second in this video. I'm sorry. I'll try to fix my horribleness. The subject in a pre-creation scenario might be an artist who's making something. Let's say me making a song. And let's say I've written the verse and I've written a chorus, but it needs a bridge. But I don't write it today. And then I'm playing the verse and the chorus one day, and I go, oh shit, it's supposed to be that. This is pre-creational in the sense that the object that's created eventually, the bridge, is not created. It's discovered. So we intuit with extroverted intuition in a creational way, but we intuit with introverted intuition in a pre-creational way. And so being extroverted intuition dominant means that I have a very effective fifth slot autopilot NI. And when I get out of the way, I can engage pre-creation and art successfully. It's hard for me to remember to get out of the way. I tend to be very trial and error when I'm making stuff in a recording. these pre-creational moments only occur to me in songwriting, and only occur to me when I have those kind of aha moments. But what I do have is the capacity to intuit pretty well whether something that I happen upon in trial and error is a discovered thing or a created thing. You want to use all the discovered things. So as an NE Dom, I may be really good at creating a bunch of random shit, but creating a bunch of random shit is never really good. So in order to be successful at generating objects to put on the metaphysical field that have value, are interesting, engaging to other people, that either explain things well or ideally be a great song that everybody sings forever, then I have to learn to engage pre-creationally with aesthetics. So for me then, I treat pre-creation as though I'm the subject most of the time, and therefore don't engage it well. To be successfully engaged with pre-creation is to be the object that receives, or that to be the object of an action taken by an imaginary guy called pre-creator, who delivers to people discovered truths. Okay, so I know this is a little sloppy here at the end, but hopefully I hope you like this video, and I hope you like the idea of pre-creation, and I hope we get the fact that when people say I know this, they're not just we shouldn't say no, you're just predicting the future, because they're not predicting the future, they're knowing it. Just because it might turn out that their knowledge was not correct, doesn't mean that they're not knowing. And we have in epistemological parsings decided that belief and knowledge are different things, and prediction and prescience are different things, and the difference is knowledge, true knowledge, is upholds under these TI standards, and belief is irrationality, and we got to remember that all of these things are ways of paying attention. That when we ascribe a lot of status to things outside of ourselves that are really statuses about how we're paying attention, we do everyone a disservice. Thank you. I love you. Don't forget to eat plenty of whatever you want today, because this is an exciting day because I'm going to a fancy YouTube party.